Welcome to this week's OK at Work with myself, Sarah Sawyer, and my colleague Russell Berger from the Offit Kurman Labor and Employment Group. And this year we're filming our last one of 2021. And we're looking towards the new year and what 2022 has to hold, and what I think we're both in the middle of planning for the year. So we wanted to do an episode on what to be thinking about as we start a new year from a business perspective. What things to start getting ready for as you get into the new year, and kind of what are some good things to think about as you're kind of taking a step back, hopefully relaxing with some family. What are some things that your clients are taking a look at right now, Russell?
Yeah, well, I think there's kind of two parts to this. One, there's the overall business planning for 2022, which could be, developing or updating a strategic plan for the new year, marketing plans, that sort of thing. One of the things that I think is a little bit unique in that respect, this go around, is the need to plan for inflation. Depending on what metrics you're looking at and what you're reading, it certainly is a risk that we think will carry through 2022. So coming up with strategies for potential increases in component parts or supplies or labor for that matter, I think is going to be a critical part of the planning process for any business. And then as we kind of shift it towards, the people focused part of the business where you and I spend a lot of our time, I think that's, as we talked about last week, that's developing a recruiting and retention strategy that takes into account kind of the current environment. But I also think it makes sense to look at kind of where you are as a business now. Do your employment policies, do your employment practices match what your business is today? I mean, you've maybe grown a lot over the last year or the last 2 years, or who knows how long it is since you looked at your handbook, since you looked at your policies, and do these things still make sense? I can tell you there's probably new laws that have come into place that would necessitate an update. But really you want to think strategically, like do these plans, do these policies make sense for where I am as a business today and where I expect to be throughout 2022?
Yeah, I think that's a great point. And starting with the beginning of the year off with new policies, or I see a lot of times employers will implement new employment agreements. So I'll be working with them kind of at the end of the year, and they'll say, well, I want to implement a non-compete, or I want to implement a non-solicitation, or I want to add this to the agreement, or they get us involved and they really don't like their old agreement. Well, the new year is a good time to say, hey, we're making some changes in 2022. As part of those changes, we're doing all new agreements, or it's a good kind of benchmark as far as, all right, well, this is a new year thing. It's because of our, where we're headed, or we're implementing these policies, we're updating things so that people are a little bit less maybe suspicious of it, and things feel a little bit more cyclical instead of random, and kind of allowing for some stability within the business as it relates to workers and people as well.
Yeah, well, and to your point, I mean, oftentimes employers will change policies, and there's a messaging issue with rolling it out to employees, and so kind of couching it in the new year, new plan, new policies, and this is like a small piece of kind of a bigger rollout that we're doing, at the start of 2022. Probably helps to message that to employees.
Yeah, and it's not to say you can't make changes throughout the year, but it's always good to be on top of things headed into the year. People really, things kind of slow around this time. It's a good time to stop and think about where you're headed, some of the issues you mentioned with inflation, some of these other things. But I know we've been talking a lot about the worker shortages and retention issues. And we don't necessarily see those stopping anytime soon. It's been a kind of a long period that we've been dealing with these issues, and it's definitely continuing. So just kind of getting your head around that, and kind of taking a step back and saying, well, what does that look like for me in the next year? Because that's also another resource issue potentially that we see continuing through 2022 for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And just to kind of put a bow on it, which I think is probably appropriate during the holiday gifting season. But to put a bow on it, I think one of the big things is just to kind of think strategically, and as we've probably said for in every one of these episodes that we've done, the whole point of employment practices, employment laws, obviously there's a compliance component, but but we should be thinking strategically about each of these decisions. How do they help drive the bottom line of the business? How do they help a business achieve its goals? And I think this is kind of an ideal time because a lot of business owners are thinking about that, thinking about their growth, thinking about where they're going to go. How do we use our employment policies going forward to help drive us to where we want to go? Obviously, we need guardrails. We can't, drive off a cliff here and get ourselves into trouble. But what can we be doing? How can we use this to help us reach our 2022 goals that we're now setting?
Yeah, and right now compensation is something too at this time of year is on people's mind. Am I getting a raise for next year? What kind of holiday bonuses? Are you changing that structure at all moving forward? So a lot of different things to dive into and think about that. You really want to give some deep thought to the best way to do it and how it's gonna impact the next year ahead. So, well, thank you, Russell, and I will see you in the new year.
Thanks, Sarah. Happy holidays, everyone.